Raf,
James.
it's a new day in America.
That's right. A lot has happened since we last recorded an episode of the Down Round podcast.
That's right. It feels like a new world, right? I feel adrift. The vibe shift. I mean, I've been through a number of vibe shifts over the past several decades of my life.
Yeah.
You know, I've seen moments come and go.
Yeah, name
Moments.
three.
Name 3 moments.
Name 3 vibe shifts.
Name 3 vibe shifts. First one was when my primary school banned Pokemon cards. At least the offered thesis was that I can't remember if this was said by the administration or whether it was just a rumor that spread, but some kid had been forced into or peer pressured into a lopsided deal.
I mean, that's a learning experience. If there's anything that one should learn in primary school, should it not be negotiation?
Well, that's it. Well, you would think so. But
There was some extortion or something.
there was some external pressure. It wasn't a healthy and functioning market. A kid was forced to trade his holographic card for, I don't know, I can't even remember what low value card might be. A Caterpie? Does that ring a bell?
I'm not across Pokemon cards at all.
No, I haven't.
mean, I know Caterpie was very early in
Yeah, it was
Pokemon
like
Red.
it was like a little
Pidgeys, Caterpies.
it was sort of like a worm-like creature, and he traded it for like a holographic card. So first vibe shift would be when that was banned from the my primary school.
And what did that teach you? What, the power of regulation?
Well,
Is that efficient markets are not so efficient.
I'm not trying to rationalize anything or think about lessons. I'm just talking about vibe shifts where I sensed the world was off its axis and something had gone dramatically wrong. Second one was 9/11.
Yep.
And the third one, right now, because Donald Trump was elected president for a second time.
President-elect President Trump.
Donaldo Trump. He's back, folks. And it's been a little while since we always include like a little bit of a smattering of this because it's so important. Politics is so important.
Yeah.
And the personal is the political.
Personal split.
You can't say that anymore because
everything's
after this
political.
election. Anyway, but Donald Trump won the election and
Spoiler alert.
spoiler alert for anyone who's listening.
For anyone who's going through Hassan Piker's back catalogue on Twitch, is a few weeks behind.
Yeah. Spoiler alert, he did win the election. But as with anything, there's a tech angle to this. And, you know, it's been a while since we've done like a full-on tech politics episode, but I think now's the time to return to it.
Yeah.
So there's a few things we're going to talk about this episode. First, we're going to talk about the forces behind Donald Trump, like the right-wing tech types who have been sort of empowered and won by this decision, this event, and what that sort of means for them. And then we're going to talk about some of the weird little tech stories that emerged around this election, perhaps even here in Australia, for those of you in Australia.
What, like them hacking the voting machines?
Well, no.
Where did the 20 million votes go?
Where did the 20 million votes go? That's a great question.
That's what we'll be analysing.
That's what we're digging into. I've looked at the numbers, Raf, and they just don't add up. But yeah, so obviously one of the big figures in the Trump campaign and around it was Elon Musk.
Yes.
And then he sort of represented, you know, a broader constellation of people. And just to give a bit of context, because we did do an episode, I don't know, probably 9 months to a year ago, where we talked about like the current politics in tech. I'm going to summarize the entire fucking hour-long conversation we had in a really quick way right now. Tech used to be like a left liberal or centrist liberal kind of area. Like they used to be a Democratic constituency and had been for a number of years.
Including Elon Musk, etc.
Yeah.
Everyone was largely Democrat.
But then there's a new generation of tech people who are sort of controlling the discourse a little bit more, who are rationalist, more right-wing. They call themselves builders. You know, these are people who are constructing the future.
To be fair, I know we wanted to only pause on this, but like, you know, we're talking about this as if this is kind of specific to Silicon Valley and like the builder types. And this is interesting. This Californian kind of liberal tech thing has always been on, the center left of politics or whatever. Like they've always been these liberals from like Google to Apple to whatever you want to call it, like lean left. But for some reason of the last kind of 4 to 8 years, there seemed to be this like surge towards the right where it's more obvious. I mean, the same is true in the youth, right? Like the youth, young male voters voted Republican for the first time. I guess just pointing out that we obviously focus on tech and Latino men, black women,
there are broader trends for sure.
But in particular with like young men or whatever, we're like, oh no, it's the first, like Gen Z is the first men or whatever to go right. Like there do seem to be like broader things here outside of just tech. Just flagging, we're now going to proceed to talk about only tech from now on.
No, you're right. You're 100% right. But, we were talking about this, as we said, like 9 months ago.
Yeah.
Just talking about the fact that there had been a bit of a vibe shift, as you talked at the beginning of the beginning of the episode. There was sort of like a based turn in the politics of it. A lot of the founders are coming up now. And it's the same reason as we've gone into a million different episodes about there's been a rise in like Silicon Valley style military contractors who like are really thrilled to be getting into like the patriotic American flags
and
spread and into
democracy
and like all those weird like tech aligned projects about starting autonomous communities. Also there was like the crypto and NFT moment, which was definitely
we probably should, I know we're kind of waving over it, but it's probably worth saying like one thing you will note with all these things is like there is self-interest that's aligned with more of the Republican side of things, be it crypto and like you don't want regulation from like Gary Gensler and the SEC and everything. You don't want any regulation on that. Be it like military contacts where it's actually beneficial to like portray China as this massive threat and, we need to confront and therefore we need to outspend them, basically. China is so advanced. Look at all of the advanced AI stuff they're doing. Like, look at the drone stuff we're doing. We need to build our own domestic capacity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That kind of helps. Whilst, yes, there's definitely is a rightward turn, but you can see the larger structural forces that actually help the individual in these situations.
Yeah, totally. And it's also, and this is something we brought up in an episode a little while ago, the average employee of Facebook or Meta, Apple, Google is probably still a pretty bog standard liberal Democrat who doesn't buy into this.
I think that's really, the thing. The reality is the majority of like quote unquote like California tech are probably still in that. Like,
still in that thing. Although the other side of the thing that came out of this period is that like San Francisco elected a whole bunch of way more moderate and less progressive types. They're still Democrats because it's an incredibly democratic city. But, there's this whole idea of like, enough. Enough. But yeah, so as a result, and we talked about this before, the whole fact of like this little tech agenda, open source AI, crypto, all these kind of like more based parts of the tech ecosystem threw themselves behind Trump. I'm not going to say that they were the driving force here at all. I think they were, in the same ways, they were kind of a marginal constituency of the Obama coalition. They're probably a relatively minor constituency, aside from the fact that Elon Musk and JD Vance, the incoming vice president, is like a tech guy and used to be a VC. But, the Peter Thiels, that kind of side of tech have had a big win.
Yeah.
I had my takes red hot and ready to go for if he lost, where I was like, once again, folks, they're the worst elite we've ever had. They keep fucking up. They can't even win San Francisco, but they have won this time around.
Yeah.
So hats off to them.
I mean, far be it from me to prophesize about, the forces that affect friggin' American politics.
No.
But my personal opinion, take it with a grain of salt, is that, is basically just what you said. Like the actual effect of these people on the outcome. Like if you want my actual opinion, my actual political opinion or whatever, which is not what you came here for. And again, it's just, the voice of Middle Australia is that like when inflation high, very hard for incumbent party to win.
Yeah, I mean,
and the numbers kind of reflect it. But that's not what we're here to talk about. But in that context, I only bring that up to say, like, in that context, what impact did Elon Musk and Elon Musk buying Twitter have? Like, and I think there's probably a negligible. I was going to say non-negligible, but like I think it did have a negligible impact. It probably moved the dial a very, very minor amount. What effect did David Sachs have? A number close to zero.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the All In podcast were turning out a huge number of votes.
Like, like Andreessen Horowitz coming out and supporting Trump. Like, what effect did that have? Very close to zero.
in terms of like effect on electorate, you would have to say
as
so.
you know,
But
number of votes, like as in actual impact on the election, I'd say basically nothing. I mean, yes, there's a broader kind of cultural thing, which is very, very hard to put one's finger on. But like a lot of people taking victory laps or whatever, same as you say, like what effect did they have on Obama?
marginal. Yeah. No,
Like-
like they were not the driving forces of that coalition.
But I do think a more interesting question is like, what effect did Elon Musk buying Twitter and Elon Musk have?
Yeah,
on the
okay.
election?
So we'll move into the actual. I mean, nobody signed up here to hear our opinions on American politics. Least of all our American listeners, I would wager.
That'd be cool. It's like, oh, cool. A week later, I want to hear the Australians' take on it.
Let's see what the Australians say when they have no stake in it. We all have a stake. We're all part of the American empire, folks. We may be part of a far-flung colony,
Yeah.
but it doesn't mean our voices don't matter.
We're the ore in AUKUS.
Comes first. In fact, check the scoreboard, folks. US is last in that acronym. We need those fucking submarines at some point, folks.
We're not getting them.
Okay.
According to a bloke in the pub, Trump's already fired his first shot at AUKUS. No, anyone who... we're way off piste.
No.
We are never going to actually own one of those subs. I promise you this, dear downright. If you could short Australian ownership, we will one day
We're not
be
getting
able to
those.
lease one of those subs.
Just to give clarity to what Raf was just saying, we were just in the pub, and an old mate up at the bar was like, well, Trump has just fired his first shot at AUKUS. So for anyone who thinks there are no true Australian voters worried about AUKUS, I rest my case.
He said it so slow, though.
All right. So, but okay, we'll leave you to figure that out for yourselves. Not my problem. American problem. Don't want to know. But there are a few other little bits and pieces. Okay, 3 things we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about X and Elon Musk. We're going to talk about the podcast angle.
Oh, yeah, the podcast, of course.
And then we're going to talk about prediction markets. So that's long run up into the episode. But we'll start with X because we've done X a few times. And yeah, there are a lot of people who are putting up Elon Musk's acquisition of X as kind of like a civilizational breakpoint, essentially.
Yeah, another annoying take. Wow. Would you pay $44 million to be the most powerful person in the free world?
Yep.
And have the ear of the president of the most important empire? And it's
World
like
history.
he tried to get out of that deal for like months.
He really did. Yeah. Yeah. So
Like anyone who's like, oh, he had a cunning plan all along.
yeah, I mean, there was a whole thing where it was like you were playing chess. You were thinking about playing chess.
He had to be forced by a judge to buy it.
You were thinking about playing checkers, and he was playing chess with that sort of thing. I don't know if that's necessarily it, but obviously he used it to great effect as a pulpit.
It's so hard to know what effect Twitter has ever over the years. Like people credit kind of Facebook and Twitter to be like Obama's success and blah, blah, blah. And again, like I assume it's non-zero.
No, it would be non-zero. I mean, the thing that I keep coming back to that I find interesting is that there was this perception for a very long time that Twitter had like a liberal bias or whatever. It was dominated by metropolitan liberals, and the people that ran the platform were of that persuasion, and they censored conservatives and they banned them for using the N-word or whatever it is they were up to, or all these kind of conversations. So there was that. There was like the persecution angle, but then there was also like that self-reflexive Twitter is not real life. Remember how people would always say Twitter is not real life. Everyone that's on Twitter is a crazy lefty. They have really, really out there progressive opinions. And if you as a lawmaker or a politician listen to what those people are saying, you are going to fucking kill yourself. Because if you take their preferred policy to an election that people are talking about on Twitter, normal people in the real world are going to say, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, totally.
And it's kind of funny that the discourse has sort of flipped now. It's like Twitter's a really right-wing place, but now it's kind of being talked about as like, this is what it is when like you strip away all the news media propaganda. It's like a finger in the pulse. It's not noise. It's fucking signal. This is how people are really thinking. And I think people might be getting a bit ahead of their skis on this issue.
Of course. And I know it's kind of trite to say, but the whole like Google/Facebook are suppressing certain, they're putting their thumb on the scale for like political opinions when it's like, obviously Elon is
Yeah.
like doing that times a million, like, outwardly so, and like that's fine. But yeah, I mean, this is why I'm torn, and I said this to you, I was like, I'm a bit worried about this episode because like my opinion on like how much did Twitter affect is kind of like, I don't know. In America, the whole thing is like driving people out to vote, right? Because it's non-compulsory voting.
Yeah.
Whoever gets the most of their people out to vote and the least amount of people who just like can't be fucked wins. And so from that aspect, I assume that it affects people. But like, well, as I was saying before, I saw this tweet about someone being like, you know, you read these books about ancient Rome and they just kind of made like, oh, over this 100 years, you know, these people were elected and these changes happened in the Senate because the people were feeling this one thing. They were feeling like buoyed by Roman expansion, and like riding off the back of that, they voted in these people. And then you see the current situation and you're like, there are so many factors at play here affecting why people vote for Donald Trump and whatever, that it's like impossible to write a narrative currently. So like, what the hell are historians talking about?
They got no fucking idea. Making up a bunch of bullshit.
But point being, yes.
No.
Twitter.
I spoke to an American politics academic last week in the course of my 9-to-5 job, who suggested, he basically took the view, he was like, I think people are overrating it, but, and he was like, plus the fact that Twitter's usership or X's usership has declined from its peak. I think that's pretty clear.
And I'm just going to have a stab in the dark here, but I would wager that more than 50% of the users, once we remove bots, are possibly from the subcontinent.
That could be it.
Just on numbers. Sheer numbers alone, like if you do the math.
Yep.
English speakers, percentage of English speakers.
Yeah. No, I think you're probably right on that. But he said, you know, if it motivated turnout amongst like the people who use it, it was probably helpful at the margins, considering that, you know, at the end of the day, American elections are sort of won at the margins with the turnout calculus that you were talking about. He was like, maybe it really did help. But I don't know if it has that quite the central moving the Overton window and like completely changing the operating system of American discourse that some people are talking about. But definitely interesting. I need one more election to figure out if it had a lasting effect.
I need Trump to go one more time.
So if you check in on down around 4 years, maybe I'll have a more comprehensive answer for you.
The other vague aside, if we're last thing on Elon, is when you're elected or when you're part of an administration, you have to declare your shares and sell them so that you don't like it doesn't influence you.
Yep.
If you're part of an administration, like owning shares should no longer influence you. So you're able to share them, to sell them with like zero taxation or responsibility. Yeah. This is also why like typically people, very senior Goldman Sachs employees want to be like head of treasury because they get to just fucking get rid of their like tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars worth of shares. No taxation. Pretty decent deal.
Good deal.
It would be funny if Elon dumped all his Tesla shares.
But he was appointed to the head of Department of Government of Doge.
Doge, yeah.
Yeah, he gets that and dumps his Tesla shares entirely. That would be funny. I would put the likelihood as quite low, but maybe. There's that. X, TBD. Let's wait and see.
Let's wait and see if X was a good buy.
No. The second big one that I definitely find really interesting is like this podcasting chat.
Yeah.
Kamala Harris significantly spent and out fundraised Donald Trump.
Yeah, it was like more than $1 billion to something like 250 to 300 million.
Yeah. So it was significantly
US.
high. But Trump did a whole bunch of like podcasts. He did like more than a dozen, and they were all kind of like in that genre of kind of like people call it like bro podcasts, basically. Obviously, Joe Rogan was the big one, but then he also did like the Full Send Nelk Boys guys. He did like Theo Von. He did like a bunch of like
comedy adjacent,
pretty fast and loose, not a particularly highly structured podcast.
Unlike ours.
Yeah, ours are well, proof's in the pudding. We left the chair open for him and he never showed up.
Kamala refused to fly to Sydney.
She would not fly to Sydney. She said that we had to come out to her. And she didn't do Joe Rogan, but she did do Call Her Daddy.
Yes.
Which is like the second most popular Spotify podcast, or podcast on Spotify. It used to be Spotify owned, but it no longer is. Moved Sirius XM.
One of those words that has always just popped up around
Sirius XM,
Yeah,
a
yeah.
digital radio subscription.
Yeah. Very America coded.
Yeah, exactly. I don't get it. I don't care to understand what's going on there. No, you're so right. It's one of those things where it's like, I know what Sirius XM kind of is, but I have never ever felt compelled to like really understand what people are subscribing to when they subscribe to Sirius XM. Nobody tell us in the comments either.
Okay, so the other big take with the big kind of grandiose take I hear with podcasts, much like the Elon Genius. Sorry, this is not quite at the level of like Elon Genius. He saw this coming, 4D chess.
Yeah.
But more in the like, what impact did it have? Is people go like, back in the day, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he talked directly to you on the radio. Then you had Kennedy versus first Nixon debate, and Nixon the sweaty one or whatever.
He was a sweaty guy, yeah.
But Kennedy looked just
photogenic
up there, and he owned the medium. And then Obama owned the kind of email social media era or whatever.
Yeah.
And now new context and zeitgeist, Trump has owned the podcast.
Yeah.
And again, I'm just a bit like, really? I know that my interest should be like, yes, if you're an advertiser and you're listening,
this is the most powerful medium that has ever existed, and we are the most powerful practitioners of that medium.
If you want customers to connect with your brand in a deeper emotional way so that it isn't just a brand but a relationship, then podcasting is the space for you.
That's it. Imagine if you could be Paul's Warehouse selling shoes.
And you don't have customers, you have evangelists.
That's right. We will evangelize your brand.
People will have a psychosocial relationship with your brand. They will see your brand as a friend.
Is MasterCard my friend? Yes. Yes, 100%.
But sorry, yes. Point being,
no.
Now, look, don't get me wrong. Yes, podcasts are definitely a new medium, and there is something to the idea of like engaged minutes. People talk about it all the time. It's, what is more effective, a 30-second ad? Sure, only a few million might listen to a podcast, but those few million are listening to friggin' Joe Rogan for 2.5 hours.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is the interesting thing about it, which is that in all these cases, Donald Trump went on Rogan for 3 hours. He went on the Lex Fridman podcast for, I think, that long. His conversation with Elon Musk on X, which, let's say that it's basically a podcast in terms of how people were consuming it, live podcast. That went for, 90 minutes plus. And obviously that's incredibly well suited to the way that Trump conducts himself. He can talk for 3 hours, wandering between different topics. The weave. The weave.
Wouldn't know anything about that myself.
That's it. So it suits his style really, really well. But it is also interesting that for all the conversations about the fact that nobody reads anything anymore, which is true, and like our intention has been obliterated by TikTok and and looking at news feeds all day, people still do. It is like one of the very few mediums you have left where huge section of the population will listen to something that's very, very long or like engage with something that's very, very long. And let's be clear, a lot of the time when you listen to a 3-hour Joe Rogan podcast, a good chunk of it is him being like, Jamie, pull that up. Can you Google International Revenue Service? Are you kidding me? They take how much from my salary? Like, and spend it on roads? Like that is so much. That's a huge portion of it. But, it's still something that you engage in for a long period of time. So as a result, it's kind of like one of the only formats that you have left where it's like you can put forward, theoretically, a long, reasoned, deep policy discussion that isn't just sound bites.
No, it is true.
And that's how it's being talked about.
Yeah, this is where I'm torn because my gut wants to say it, but like I feel like my gut 8 years ago or whenever it was, probably 12 years ago now, would have said like, and probably was saying because I was in cyber utopia that like, oh yeah, like Obama is connecting with people via social media. And maybe he was. But now my gut says with like Obama connecting people with Facebook and blah, blah, blah. It's like really to kind of 1 minute long and 30-second long videos really like affect change. And maybe they do if that's the only person you're seeing and you're seeing it 5 times a day. But I can right now see if you listen to someone talking for 3 hours, I can see you being like, this guy talks a lot of sense. And same thing with Kamala. It doesn't have to be Trump. Like if I listen to Anthony Albanese, if I listen to, you name it, Mao Zedong,
I'm in,
talk for 3 hours, I'd be like, you know what? This guy talks sense. I'm going to vote for him.
Look, I'm not going to prescriptively tell you how to vote in an Australian election or how to think about Australian politics. I think that's well outside the remit of this podcast. But I will say that Splendor in the Grass, I think it was like 2017 maybe. I was working at Pedestrian at the time, and we were shooting like a video series that we did, which used to go off on Facebook. It was really simple. It was literally just called Banger or Nah. And you would play a song for a public figure or a musician or whatever.
I remember this.
I'd be like, is it good? And we did like people with like Dylan Francis and a whole bunch of like Lil Bow Wow. We did an episode with.
And you play like Savage Garden or whatever.
Yeah, totally. It was good. But we did one with Anthony Albanese at Splendor. I think it was 2017 or 2018 maybe. And he could not do it. He could not express a single view about any of the songs we played him. And we couldn't use the video. It was completely unusable.
I played a charity. Sorry, we're talking about to our non-Australian listeners.
The Prime Minister
the current Prime Minister of Australia. I played a charity football match with him, and he put "fucking" in the wrong place, like in his sentences.
Go on.
He's like, "We're gonna beat fucking them," and he'd put it in an unnatural spot in the sentence.
That's so funny. We're gonna beat fucking them.
Like that kind of stuff.
See, that ain't right. Between that and like you would play, I can't remember what kind of songs we were playing him at the time. It would have been like charting stuff back in 2017 or whatever it was.
Amyl and the Sniffers.
No, it was pre that. It was pre that. Anyway, played him, but yeah, he just couldn't form an opinion on any of it. So anyway, that's why social media is bad to convey a political message. Anyway, good luck to you, Albo.
Good luck to you, Albo.
Inflation's been high, and the global experience is not totally aligned in your favour, but all the best in May.
Inflation happens. This is the thing. Like, this is why I'm talking about podcasts and fucking X and this, that, and the other. It may just be like prices go up, politicians go down. Simple as that.
Prices go. Hey, look, I don't like it when things are more expensive than they were.
No, not many people do.
No. Given the option, I would love things to be cheaper than they currently are.
If things go up, I'm looking for someone to blame.
And if it's the guy that's on TV every single day, and I'll be like, that fucking guy again?
Yeah.
You ruined my life. And I'm going to ruin yours.
I'm going to exact revenge.
Great impulse. Anyway, so yeah, I'll make one final point on that, which is that no one's really talking about it, but Spotify, big winner from this discourse. To be clear, Spotify, they started doing podcasts back in 2016. We talked about this on an episode in the past. They would love if people spent their time on Spotify, engaged with the app, paying for the app, preferably, but also not listening to stuff that they have to pay 80 cents on the dollar to
Sony and
Universal and Warner Group. They don't want to be doing that. So great. They wanted to do that. They made a big push in like 2018, 2019, where it was like, we're going to require Gimlet, we're going to require Anchor and start doing podcast infrastructure. We're going to make our own shows that are exclusive to Spotify, and they're going to be amazing.
Yeah, beautiful listens, you know.
And they very quickly learned that it's actually not easy at all to do original content anything. Their Gimlet acquisition kind of crashed and burned. Used to be one of the most revered podcast studios.
Reply All, Science Versus, Startup Pod, whatever it's called.
Yeah. So, and they quickly found that it's more art than science. It's very hard to consistently be putting out content like that. The only tech companies that have gotten good enough at that at a consistent level are probably like, I don't know, Netflix.
Yeah, even then.
Even then,
people talk about like they haven't really had a banger in a while, and they've kind of gone back to just making sure that they have like a huge catalog of the Seinfelds and the kind of ambient TV things.
Tech companies have not been good historically at like building out and maintaining their own great content businesses.
Because it's friggin' hard.
It's fucking hard.
HBO seemed to be one of the few who had the secret sauce, is my understanding.
Yeah, and I read the HBO book, which I can't remember what the name of it was, but it was great. And just like the description of how they turned themselves into a consistent, insanely high quality content machine, and the effort it took and like the people it took to make that happen is something that like very hard to replicate. And Apple couldn't even do it when they hired a whole bunch of HBO's people to specifically do that. Anyway, so Spotify ran into that problem. So at some point they were like, building up our audience is fucking insane. Let's just buy
Let's just pay Joe Rogan $250
Let's
million.
pay Joe Rogan $250 million. And that's what they did. And they re-signed that deal, I think it was in February or...
And I think we talked about this at the time, like when, I think he said some anti-trans stuff. Or
they had a period of...
There was like a talk of boycott and basically internally, what's his name, Toby Lutke?
No, you're thinking of Shopify. Daniel Ek.
Daniel Ek, thank you. Okay.
Yep.
Use a European name.
Yeah.
I know that Toby Lutke is Canadian. It's all good.
Yeah.
But, there's that Polish kind of sound.
Absolutely.
Was like, I understand people are mad about this, but you have to understand that he brings in so many subscribers to our business that he's fundamentally important. And so, yes, I understand you're angry, but we aren't going to do anything about it.
Yeah, no, totally. There was a bit of trying to cancel Joe Rogan, funny kind of like tail end of that era.
Yeah.
Let's try to get Spotify to take Joe Rogan down. Definitely seems absurd now. Point is, and I was kind of running up, Spotify, they bought Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan's now being talked about as like, accurately or not, an election swinger.
Yeah.
A pivotal moment of the election was Trump going on there and Kamala not going on
I
there.
don't think that was a pivotal.
I don't think it was. But again, it might have turned out that young male vote that swung, at least, again, at the margins, turnout.
Yeah.
It might have worked. But the fact of the matter is, I think Spotify's a winner there.
And don't be wrong. So I'm not saying that, like, I have been Rogan pilled for a very long time.
Big Rogan head.
You can go back to a long time and you'll never hear me say a bad word about Joe. Kindred spirits in a lot of ways. Podcasters from back in the day.
Podcasters, MMA personalities.
Yeah, I do like MMA. Yes, that's true.
Fear Factor host.
Well, I used to work at Channel 7. Yeah. Mike Whitney, he's a big Channel 7 head.
Yep.
Actually, I can't tell that story. Anyway, continue.
Anyway, okay. So point is, I don't know if I agree with you. I don't know how much the podcasting swung, but the fact that it is part of the discourse is interesting.
It is interesting. Podcasts are impactful because podcast numbers are lower in that a big podcast in Australia would have 100,000 listeners.
Yeah.
Right. That's like a pretty big podcast in Australia. Not the biggest, obviously. The biggest, more than that. But like if you are getting 100,000 listeners an episode, you're a big podcast. Obviously, compared to TV numbers, friggin' social media numbers, like, a video or whatever, or followers, that's nothing. But the reality is engaged minutes, as you say, if someone's listening to you for friggin' 1 hour a week, 60 minutes, if 100,000 people listen to 60 minutes, that's so much more influential than...
Again, we were talking about it last week, the fact that, Google's AI suite includes Notebook LLM, the ability to turn any document that you supply into a podcast, suggests that it's a very key part of a whole bunch of people's information diet.
And there is something very different about audio. Literally today, I exported a WhatsApp group chat, put it into Notebook LM, and with no context whatsoever, I literally just you can only do a certain amount. So it was only the last 2 years. There's so much.
2 years worth of posts.
2 years worth of posts in a group chat with 5 people, and just put it in there and then press the button of go make a podcast.
Yeah.
And yes, one is listening to AI, but when AI is talking about you and the group chat, highly compelling, talking about you specifically. And obviously everyone in the group chat listened to it and was highly engaged. Do it with your group chats. WhatsApp far easier than iMessage. iMessage basically impossible. It's a fun thing to do. B, going back to what I was talking about the other day about social media making AI that's, yes, it sounds weird Facebook's going to show me AI slop. I don't want that. Facebook's going to show me AI slop
about
me.
Killer.
About me.
Killer.
And my friends, maybe.
Hell yeah.
Here's you and your friends.
Now we're talking.
In a funny photo or a cool photo where you're looking amazing. And also now, you're wearing something that you can buy. People are going to be into it.
Recipe for success, folks. That's our summary of podcasts. So, podcast is a concept. Anyway, last thing I want to talk about is prediction markets, which was the other part of it. We probably should do a whole episode on this at some point because it's becoming a hotter and hotter subject, especially now that it's being talked about in the context of the US election. So, just to give you a really quick summary, prediction markets are essentially gambling platforms, but they are generally decentralized. They're very crypto aligned.
Yeah.
Polymarket is the big one, very much a crypto thing.
Because, like, to flag, it's the legal grounds of, like, being able to bet on anything are very much unclear.
Very unclear. So, yeah, you do it via stablecoins on Polymarket. And the way it works is that, you know, the odds are calculated based on the bets that people are putting on any given subject. They pay out to $1. So on Polymarket, your odds are issued. You might say that, you know, Kamala Harris is $1.30 or whatever odds to win. You buy stock in this event closing in favor of Kamala Harris winning the election. And if she does win, you get $1 for every share that you bought at 30 cents.
The point is, like, unlike, it's like cash out, I guess, in like sports bet apps or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's like, the point is, if you buy like, oh, Donald Trump is a rank outsider and you put money on Donald Trump, if he is no longer a rank outsider and it gets closer, you can cash out then. You can sell your shares effectively rather than just like he either wins or loses. So it creates a bit more of like a liquid market.
That's right. And obviously the discourse around the US election last time and the time before is that traditional polling, which involves picking up the phone and asking people who they're going to vote for, had produced fails, had not some level of polling failure, you know, a few points off to substantially more points off. So people weren't quite as trustful. This is being pitched as a solution where it's like, it's the free market, baby. It's people with skin in the game. There's no polling errors. It's just the collective mind consciousness of everyone with like an interest in this topic.
Yeah. But the big story out of it was like a French dude, right, who put $45 million.
$45 million on Polymarket into Trump.
And now I'm going to say there's huge, what is it, survivorship bias or whatever, survivor's bias here where like people did flag like, hold on, like a lot of the Trump kind of number is based on like some random whale has put $45 million onto Donald Trump. Yeah. And now that Trump's won, like there's all these interviews with him. He's like, oh yeah, I saw some polling about whether asking people who their neighbor is going to vote for was far more accurate than asking who they are going to vote for, because, you know, the silent Trump vote and the shy this, and people aren't honest about themselves, but they'll project onto their neighbor who they think. And that's what I saw. And that's why I put $45 million. Like some clown put $8 million or $10 million on Kamala. And like, you can guarantee had she won, these same interviews would be happening with them.
Yeah.
But right now it's like moron, clown, genius French guy.
Genius French Polymarket whale. Yeah. I mean, the conversation was being had around it is that, you know, the polls were wrong again, except Polymarket and Kalshi and all these other betting prediction markets that emerged were right about Trump being up for so long. So they've had a massive status boost.
Yeah.
Keep in mind,
in that, well, most of the polls I think were with Trump, but they certainly tightened towards the end. Whereas like the betting markets didn't tighten as much.
No, there was, and you know, throughout the whole conversation, people were like, most of the people who were betting on Polymarket are like crypto adjacent people who are like comfortable with transacting in stable coins and whatever. That's going to be a more right-leaning group. They're going to favor Donald Trump no matter what. Obviously, whether or not that's true, the markets were vindicated in this case. Keep in mind, like, if you go on Polymarket, you can see markets for like everything.
My understanding is that anyone can put a market forward, right? Like, so you've got like, will Donald Trump die within the next 15 days?
Yeah.
And you can put money on it.
You can put money on it. You know, if you looked at their election page, they had odds on everything. Like, will Donald Trump receive a higher percentage of the black vote compared to 2020? Or like, will Donald Trump appoint RFK Jr. to his cabinet? You know, will he do X within the first 100 days of his presidency? There's like a market for everything. It very much comes from like this rationalist view where it's like markets are the perfect reflection of the data, essentially. This decentralized market where people invest is going to be far more reliable than traditional polling. Whether or not that bears out, bookmark this, because everyone's going to be talking about prediction markets a lot more over the coming years. We're using this as kind of like the vindication. The polls, the crooked pollsters, folks, they were wrong, but Polymarket and Kalshi were right all along.
One thing that actually gets my goat, that really pisses me off, is like, presidential elections happen every 4 years, right?
Yep.
That's not that frequent. And people draw the most just insane new worldviews around whether things work or don't work, and like the wills of people and like the movements and statistics and like just universal truths over something where it's like, well, hasn't happened since 1988. What, like freaking 5 elections ago or whatever? Like, okay, cool, man. Like, none of this shit, none of you know anything. You don't know what you're talking about. It's all just vibes. That's my takeaway.
Everything is vibes. Prediction markets are just vibes.
Yeah.
But you're putting your money where your mouth is.
Yeah. You're putting your mouth where your nuts are.
Amen, brother.
If you're listening to this, did you know there's another world out there where you get a second episode of Down Round a week?
Yep, it's called Down Round Premium.
That's right. And there's no interruptions.
No interruptions, no ads. 2 episodes a week, including the free one you're getting right now, plus another one.
Yep. $7 a month, not a week, a month. Downround.net. Downround.net. Instant access to the whole back catalogue as well. You've got so much to catch up on.
There's so much. Get around it.